I'm going to bring my fellow panelists up here to the stage, Melanie Adams and Melissa Songer. And we're really excited to talk to you today about a major initiative that we started at the Smithsonian last year called Life on a Sustainable Planet. And it was really important to us because I think most of you realize, or have certainly gotten probably over the last several days, the Smithsonian is this incredibly broad organization. So I oversee all the science content at the Smithsonian, which is kind of crazy. We do everything from take the first image ever of a black hole with the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We study the genetics of just about every living thing. We help restore rainforests around the world. We help save species around the world. So with this incredibly broad scientific portfolio coming in as the Undersecretary for Research, I really thought about what is the chief threat right now that we see. And of course it's climate change. But it also is even broader than that. Unfortunately, a lot of it's human activity, it's overfishing, it's encroachment on ecosystems. So if you look at this all together, you think with all the science we're doing at the Smithsonian, are we helping make real change? Are we providing the scientific data so that if you're a policymaker, if you're someone who's looking at your own community, are we helping you understand what the effects of climate change are, and are there pathways to resilience for ecosystems, for species? And so looking across this huge portfolio, I was really excited to find how much amazing work the Smithsonian is doing. And so we launched an effort to try to bring our arms around that. And it really centers on a couple of major pillars. The work we do in ecosystems on the land, whether it's in grasslands around the world, like out in Montana, out on the prairie, whether it's in tropical rainforests or northern forests. How are we working to save species and have human and wildlife interactions take place in a way that is sustainable for wildlife, but frankly also sustainable for people. We live in these ecosystems. We need to have, communities need to have economic benefit also. We work in the oceans. We work a lot on something you've probably heard of called blue carbon. That is, how does ocean help pull carbon out of the atmosphere through mangroves, through seagrasses? How do those natural systems protect coastlines? And how do they also interact with everything that lives in the ocean? Again, strong connection to people and communities. You have local fishing communities that need those ecosystems for their very survival. Cutting across those two kind of broad areas of science is shared health, which is kind of a new concept that people have been talking about now for probably about at least a decade. We know from the pandemic that many viruses originate in wildlife, get traded back and forth between multiple, livestock, wildlife, and eventually can possibly be transmitted to humans. So this interaction of wildlife, livestock, and humans is incredibly important, and the health of ecosystems affects how viruses move between those populations. So cutting across all those ecosystems is this concept of shared health that we work on. The other really strong pillar that, cross-cutting across those two is environmental justice. To me, there's no better way to think about racial injustices of the past and the present than to look at how communities are differentially affected by decisions around the environment. So whether it's where factories are being put, where the most polluted air is, where the most unhealthy water is. Communities of color have been long disproportionately affected. So if we're developing solutions that we want to be sustainable and we want to be real, we have to work with communities to develop those solutions. We have to understand what their issues are in communities here in the US, around the world where we work, and really understand how do we work deeply in partnership with communities to help develop resilient, sustainable solutions to environmental challenges. So that's kind of life in a sustainable planet in a nutshell. Today, I thought it would be helpful to bring in two of our really top organizations in these areas to give you a little more sense and for us to talk about how we think about education. And of course, then we want to hear back from you. So I'm going to make sure we have lots of time for questions or advice you can give us on how we better communicate, talk about, reach out to educators to help with this incredible challenge. You know, people have called climate change the existential crisis of our time, and I would argue biodiversity loss fits right in there also. First of all, Melanie Adams is the director of the Anacostia Community Museum. Absolutely one of my favorite, you know, a hidden gem of the Smithsonian, because in general, our big museums really serve the public. They serve tourists, you know, they're kind of these places. Anacostia Community Museum is where the Smithsonian has deep learning on how to work with communities. And so really excited Melanie is here to talk about that. Melissa Songer is from the National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. And this is where we're just doing absolutely, and Melissa is herself, as one of our scientists, doing absolutely cutting edge research on this issue. How do we preserve species? How do we, when we can, reintroduce species into ecosystems? Can we take a degraded, threatened ecosystem and bring it back to health? And we're actually doing that, which I tend to be a bit of a pessimist. The work we do at the Smithsonian makes me an optimist. So, Melanie, I'm going to start with you, if I can go to my questions and read them without my glasses. You started just this past year, you launched the Center for Environmental Justice at the Anacostia Community Museum. Can you talk a little bit about why we didn't put that at a science museum? What's your definition of this? And you know, why ACM? And I won't yet get to where we're going with it, which is really exciting.
So I joined the Anacostia Community Museum back in August of 2019, and I remember when interviewing, this was the area I knew the least about. I knew art, I knew history, I didn't know a lot about science. And the young woman at the time, Katrina Lashley, who was running the program, is just infectious. So she gets you so excited about the work she's doing. And so the reason why we created this center at Anacostia really is because we've been doing the work all along. As Ellen mentioned, we are a community-based museum. We were founded back in 1967 by the Smithsonian, so we have been a Smithsonian for over 50 years. And some people will even say one of our first exhibits, which was The Rat, Man's Invited Affliction, which looked at the rodent population in Southeast, could be considered our first environmental exhibit. But what really makes the Anacostia Community Museum unique, as Ellen mentioned, is really our grounding in community. And so what we have done, starting as early as 2010, is really creating environmental programs that focused on the community. Our first program was really the Urban Waterways Project. And if you know anything about DC, so we're located near the Anacostia River. And our staff member at the time, Gail Lowe, really wanted to know about the people and how they use the river and the history of the river. And so she created this wonderful project that not only looked at the Anacostia, but also looked at urban communities around the country and their relationships to the river. We then built upon that and actually created an exhibit around it called Reclaiming the Edge, Urban Waterways and Civic Engagement. And when you hear our staff talk about their work around the environment, they really look at it as civic engagement. So how can we really make sure the community is involved in all levels of the environmental movement? Everything from implementation, enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And I know from a layman's term, when I talk about it, I say women of color have really been at the forefront of the environmental movement, because if you think about it, they're the ones sitting at their kitchen table wondering why their child is sick. Is it the water? Is it the air? Is it the ground? So what is happening? And so many times, these women and their work have been discounted. And so one of the things that we really do through the center is really lift up those community stories of the work that's already being done. So we don't necessarily, we do base things on scholarship, but we really look at the women and their expertise as really being able to do a lot of this work. So that's why the center is based at the Anacostia Community Museum. And also because just that relationship that we've been able to develop with the women over time, we're a trusted source, which helps. And we really do ground our work in their stories, which is really important. Also, because of where we're located in a community, so we're surrounded by houses and other, by houses essentially. So we do have a great opportunity to engage with the community on a more regular basis. So I like to describe it as most of my colleagues on the mall, their visitation would be tourists, whereas the Anacostia Community Museum, really our visitation is more local people. And so as we look at the programs we are trying to develop around the center, we actually have 4 pillars. Inclusive leadership, where we really focus on women and youth. Faith, so that role that faith and religion plays in your environmental work. Cultural practice, and that really is putting the humanities into the science around environmental work. And finally, policy. So those are the 4 pillars on which we develop all of the programs that we're working on, and I will leave it there for the next question.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So Melissa, so being from, as we say, NZCBI, or the National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute, zoos, a lot of people, and I think especially I've got 3 kids, and so to me, when my kids were growing up, zoos were a lifeline of a place where my kids could run around and get their energy out, and so we spent a lot of time at zoos when my kids were little. But I also, as I went through, have really deeply understood how zoos are deeply places of helping the public understand, providing a green space for cities, but also are such places of conservation. And so can you talk a little bit about how NZCBI fits into this ecosystem of zoos and conservation organizations?
Sure. So the National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute, we are home for 2,000 some animals and representing hundreds of species. So it's really a place, it's a fantastic place to really engage and understand biodiversity and really the wonder of nature. And I think that's especially, as you said, in places where, in urban areas where it can be difficult to have those experiences, it's a great opportunity. But really, it's a tip of the iceberg of what we're doing around biodiversity, because we are not just working on the animals that we have at the zoo, but we're working on their counterparts in the wild, many other species. We have over 100 science staff that are working here and also around the world. So in 40 countries, critical ecosystems around the world where our goal is really to restore endangered species and their ecosystems, both through research and also through connecting with people, connecting with stakeholders, local communities, to develop sustainable solutions together. So that's a really kind of critical part of what we're doing, and much of it is based in work that we do at the zoo. So, for example, much of the research that we have going on at the Conservation Biology Institute is about building stronger captive populations. And they serve as a fail-safe when we have extirpations or extinctions of different species in the wild. We have a second chance. And so that's one of the things that we focus on. I'll give an illustration. Ellen mentioned our GPS, our Great Plains Science Program, and I think it gives some good examples. This is a project that's relatively new in Montana, and it's based in the prairie ecosystems there. And it's really one of the few intact temperate prairie systems left on the planet. We have 4 full-time staff there, and they work with interns and fellows and students, but they're studying the system in order to restore and rewild it. And one of the big challenges there has been through the systematic generations of removal of key species that are really important for the ecosystem. And so we began working with American Prairie, which is an NGO. They buy and lease thousands of acres of land that has been used for ranches, and they're making it more wildlife friendly. So, for example, rather than running cattle, they are bringing bison. And the bison they're not only an iconic species for the American West, but they're also an engineer for the ecosystem. We're also working with nearby Fort Belknap Indian Reservation, and that is we're working with them about bringing back some carnivores, particularly the swift fox, which is a species that was extirpated from their lands, but has cultural significance and also is an important predator in the system. So we've been working together to reintroduce the species. And more recently, we started working to bring back black-footed ferrets to the region as well. And this is really a flagship species for CBI. We're one of the few facilities in the country that successfully breeds them and returns them in the wild. So our ecologists have been recently received support to figure out what's going on with those ferrets once they're reintroduced. They're going underground, so we can't do our normal thing we would do is track them. But by combining dead reckoning technology and GPS tracking, we're hoping that for the first time ever, we'll get to see what's going on underground so that we can create sort of burrowscape or 3D maps. And that is going to tell us a lot if we can learn more about their ecology and behavior, and hopefully will give us better strategies for helping them survive and become sustainable populations in the wild. So we have so many research projects going on there. Those are just some examples. But going hand in hand with whatever the work we're doing, it's about capacity building and training the next generation of scientists, community conservation leaders, informing the public. So we're also working with 4 of the reservations in the state, and they are leading an initiative to establish long-term socioecological research network. And so working to monitor the grasslands to understand better the impacts of climate change and biodiversity, and so really for enhancing their connection with the land and their heritage. So we're also now trying to expand that to some of other key grasslands that we're working in Kenya and Brazil and Mongolia, so that this can be even a global network looking at grasslands. And so it continues to grow the more we're there. But ultimately, it all is coming full circle because we are bringing these stories and what we're learning back to the zoo and communicating that through exhibits, outreach, and other programs. And so that's kind of, we're able to share what we're learning and pass that along to the public as well. So it's all connected.
You know, when you say bison are ecosystem engineers, when I've been out there a couple times, and it's really cool. And I didn't, for when you have these river systems, these are pretty arid actually areas that don't get a huge amount of rainfall every year. But cattle would tend to go down and they tend to stand next to a river because they need a lot of water. So they tend to erode riverbanks, which then allows the trees not to grow, which then affects the river. When bison come in, they're actually very drought tolerant. Bison comes in, takes a drink, leaves. So in areas we have where we've worked where bison have been reintroduced on the prairie, all of a sudden the cottonwoods have come back along the banks of the streams. And when the cottonwoods have come back, the birds and the insects come back, the fish come back in the river because the river's now cleaner. And so it's amazing if you can find these ecosystem engineer species and reintroduce them, all of a sudden you can take an ecosystem that's in crisis or really failing and you can turn it around. And you're like, wow, there are actually workable solutions out there to what sometimes seems like an overwhelming crisis. So because you all are educators, I really wanted to talk to you both about education, because this is something that the Smithsonian is really interested in, how we grow our education programs in a way that really brings in helping people understand science, technology, engineering, math, how that helps us go about identifying problems and finding solutions. But I am a huge fan of that the arts for STEAM, to say we need to really figure out how to tell stories and how to bring people together. Now, I know both of our programs have, both of these areas of the Smithsonian have educational programs, but we'd love to hear from you, especially in the Q&A. You know, what do you need, and how can we help serve you better? So Melanie, I know you already mentioned that youth is going to be a really important part of the Center for Environmental Justice. Can you talk a little bit about what you're already doing, which I'm so excited about?
Sure. So we piloted this year a 6-month program. It's an Environmental Justice Academy for young women and non-binary individuals. We have 32 participants. They're actually here right now in DC. It's all locally based, but for the last 2 weeks they've been on site. We've done some on site, some virtual, and they're working on their capstone projects. But essentially, these are amazing high school students from around the region who didn't know they had an interest in environmental justice, and I say that and laugh because when you ask why they joined, you have a variety of reasons, and some were already interested in environmental justice and others weren't, but now they're all really excited about it. And what they're really learning is that their role, so what role can they play in their communities and really share this information around environmental issues. They're all interested in very different environmental issues in their communities, and what we really hope to be able to bestow upon them is they are leaders now. Like, one of the best things I heard when talking about youth is you don't say emerging leaders or inspiring leaders, you say leaders, because they really are leading this movement. And so every time I hear them speak, we use them a lot for panels and things. They're just so excited to share what they're learning about the environment. And many times they're like, why didn't we know this before? Why didn't we know? And it's mostly, a lot of the presenters are women of color. So they're saying, why didn't we know all of these amazing women of color in the environmental justice movement? And so they're doing their capstone projects for us tomorrow evening over at Natural History. And then the program will be done again next year. Right now, we are still keeping it local, so it is for students in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, but we do hope to expand nationally in the future.
Awesome, thank you. Now, Melissa, I know the NZCBI is really thinking about how they engage kids, how they get people to go outside and look at what's around them.
Yeah, we have 2 million visitors every year that are coming to be at the zoo, but we have many more as well online. And the zoo does provide a sort of laid-back, fun opportunity for learning experiences. So we have a lot of formal and informal educational programs that are really designed to reach diverse audiences of a range of ages and interests, but really allowing that connection with nature by being able to see an animal is, we think, really important, and also being in that green space. But we are working to message around, by inspiring kids to care about animals, also to motivate them to take actions to save species. So that's really kind of the underlying goal for a lot of the things we're doing. And like I said, we have this kind of tangible opportunity for them to come into contact, to see an animal moving and get excited about it, and then learn that there are things that they can do that can make a difference. You know, we're facing a biodiversity crisis of such proportions that we can't rely on science and scientists to save the day, and so we need everybody. And that's one of our messages, is that you can do things every day about what you're eating and buying and how you're traveling and using resources that make a difference. And so that's one of our key reaches to the public. But we're also we're taking it a step further through citizen science programs, and we have these going on around the world and in all 50 states. One of our great examples is the Smithsonian E-Mammal program, which is now, in the past few years, evolved to be a multi-partner initiative, which is called Wildlife Insights. And it's really simple. It's based around camera trapping, infrared cameras, and students, or really anyone, can get involved, local communities, adults, to set up infrared cameras. They can be left for days and weeks. They're pretty low maintenance. And basically, when the heat picture changes in front of them, it snaps a picture, and you're essentially capturing wildlife. So you're getting that image, you have got the place and the environment and the time, and it's like a museum specimen, essentially, and we can have that forever. So we can generate great amounts of data this way, and if we can get it into some kind of usable, accessible format, we can use it for all sorts of things. So Wildlife Insights provides cyber tools that users can upload their images and actually use artificial intelligence to tag the images. So thousands of images can be tagged in minutes. So it really can generate a lot of data. And so it can be helpful for conservation questions as well as giving people the knowledge about biodiversity in their own communities. So for example, there are local communities in Colombia that are using the cameras to delineate areas that could be used for jaguar corridors. So they want to try to figure out ways to have better connectivity between Mexico and Argentina. And a newer program, Snapshot USA, is now operating in all 50 states to monitor biodiversity and answer important conservation questions. So in just 5 or 6 years since this has started, it's now 600 different organizations are involved in 95 countries, and together have produced 34 million images. So it's just incredible to think about, how people have powered this and made it possible for us to do something that we never really could have done otherwise. So it's contributing to the science, but also the perception of nature and understanding and appreciation of nature and making that connection for so many communities. So. Anyway.
We're about ready for questions. So, again, love to have a dialogue about some of the things we're doing. I also want to give a shout out to the Smithsonian Science Education Center, which has produced some curriculum for the global goals. And they do have curriculum on biodiversity, on water, on some of these challenges. So they're working right now on a curriculum on resilience. And a lot of it is what are standards-oriented activities that kids can do to get outside, look in their communities, and think about how these big problems end up as local issues, and how do you give kids agency in thinking about what their role is in helping to fix the planet. So we would love to take questions. And we have someone with a microphone who's standing right behind you.
Yes, absolutely. So we have 2 virtual questions, and then we'll take 1 question here from the audience as well. So the first virtual question, originally I was attending this session to pass ideas on for my science teacher friend. I'm actually a history teacher, but wondering if Melanie has any ideas for how to help intertwine our work together. So I feel like that's right up your alley.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we do. So when you're looking at the work for our Center for Environmental Justice, it really is intertwined with history, with the arts, depending upon if this person is in DC. Our current exhibit is called To Live and Breathe, Women's Environmental Justice in Washington, D.C. So it actually tells the history of the women in the movement in D.C. So I think there are a lot of different ways to be able to tell the history. And why it was really important is Gail Lowe, who started looking at this, is she felt the science took the people out, if that makes sense. So they were studying the science, but they weren't studying the people and their connections to the river. So lots of connections there.
Yeah, a huge amount of history on this. And I also should have given a shout out to someone who's not on the panel, and that's our Tempo spacecraft. We operate a spacecraft for NASA. We just launched it about a month ago. It gets first light next week. And Tempo is amazing because it's actually going to be measuring air pollution in communities across the United States, basically at neighborhood scales. So say over the Washington, D.C. metro area, there's like 30 data points. And so you would be able to say, how does the air in my community compare to one in a different community? How can I look at how communities of color might have different air than other communities, rural versus cities? You're going to be able to, it's going to be really simple. We're creating all kinds of teacher tools to use with it. So stay tuned for, again, the satellite's called Tempo, and it's operated by the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. Next, yeah.
It's just a question about the program you were mentioning. I'm a science teacher in town, and I was wondering, what was it called again, and how could I find information for some of my students if I thought they might like it?
So for the academy? Yes. So we will, so it's finishing up. Friday is the last day, and then we will relaunch again. So we recruit in the fall. And so if you go to the Anacostia Community Museum's website, that's a great place to find it. You'll also see some other programs related to environmental justice under there that they might be interested in. But it all should be on our website.
Great. I regret that we have just enough time for one last question, but I think it's a good one too. So the camera project that Melissa talked about sounds so cool, exclamation point, exclamation point. Does the Smithsonian have any other community science or citizen science projects that my students can contribute to, always trying to help them see authentic connections to the research?
There is another longer-term program that's been going on called Neighborhood Nest Watch, and that's through the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. And so it's a similar type of concept where the people are trained to identify birds and do surveys, whether in their backyard or places nearby. And it's actually a very long-term data set. I'm not sure what year they started, but there are resources online looking under the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center.
Yeah, and I will say this is one of my aims for this coming year is to create a central portal where you can find all of our citizen science projects from across the Smithsonian. We actually have them at every single science unit, but it's really hard to, you have to go to each one and look at it, and I'm working on that because I realize that for you all having a really simple way to access where can I do great citizen science is really helpful, and also making sure that we explain how these might align with curriculum standards so that they're more useful to teachers also. So we'll work on that. I'm going to take that as my assignment for the coming year, and next summer you can hold me accountable if it's not done. Thank you all for coming. We've really appreciated this. And again, if you have thoughts on how we can do better in this space and to let us know what we can provide better to help you do your jobs more easily, please convey that back to all of us here at the summit, because we really want to work in partnership. The planet's in crisis and we need all hands on deck. So thank you very much.